I'm Drew Moore from Advanced Trading. For over 40 years, we've helped the agricultural community weather the volatile markets caused by local, global, and seasonal events. Every day, our exclusive research team and experienced risk advisors share valuable insights and are sought out by the industry for perspective and market analysis. With over 30 offices in 11 different states, we're confident we will be able to assist you wherever you are located. You never stop working, and neither do we. Good morning. Good morning. We just received the November USDA report, and we have our usual guests, Brian Basting and Michael Reginelli, on from our studio. Currently, D's corn is down a penny. January beans are down 4 cents, and December Chicago wheat is down 14 cents. A little bit more of a muted reaction than I think most were hoping. But Brian, first question to you: what was the big takeaway from the grain side of the ledger today?
The USDA did acknowledge, Drew, that we had some stout yields across the central part of the Corn Belt. A record yield forecast now for Illinois, 215 bushels for corn. They did acknowledge, though, that the West is a bit below expectations, with some reductions noted in Nebraska and South Dakota relative to October. I guess on the supply side, they did increase the yield a bit here, Drew, compared to what it was in October. The production was up about 35 million bushels from what it was last month. Probably the bigger surprise, though, Drew, was on the demand side. USDA left exports unchanged compared to what it was in October. The pace of shipments and the pace of sales has been very anemic here the first 10, 12 weeks of the crop year. So there's a lot of ground to make up there. That number still remains a bit of a question mark. Having acknowledged that, though, Drew, ending stocks are only 10 million bushels higher than what they were in October, so really no change in corn ending stocks there. Soybeans a bit higher on the carryout with a bit larger yield compared to October. No change there in the exports either.
Sure. Thank you, Brian. Michael, on the soy complex, both domestically and afar, what stood out to you? What were the big takeaways from the USDA report?
Yeah, it's a little surprising. We cut losses pretty quick on beans. They were kind of all over the place right after the report came out, but we did get the yield back up over 50 bushels per acre. I think that's probably the headline grab. It was a little bit of a surprise in October when we talked about it that we dipped below 50, given some of the anecdotal reports of good yields out in the country as harvest was progressing. So back up over 50. Net change to carry out was a 20 million bushel increase. It's probably close to in line with the average trade estimate. I think 213, 214 was kind of where the average was, with a range of 190 up to 260. So carry out estimate kind of right in line with it. I do believe, I got to fact check it, but I do believe they did increase exports 10 million, and that is likely what worked against the increase in yield to some degree to keep it to 220. But the other thing too would be world stocks. World stocks on beans did increase quite a bit as well, maybe creating a little additional pressure as we kind of look forward here. A lot of that's relying on pretty good South American estimates.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. Brian, what's been the most recent headline grabber out of Russia, Ukraine here as of late? There certainly seems to be always an influx of different reports, but what's kind of the market driver out of the Black Sea region that's catching your eye?
There's no doubt, Drew, that we look ahead to next week with the expiration of the 120-day export corridor, the agreement that was forged this summer. I believe it expires next Friday, the 18th. If it's either Friday the 18th or Saturday the 19th, what's the fate of that agreement? Are we going to see some type of renewal? Are we going to see some type of adjustment compared to what it was here back in July? that's the big factor there, Drew. I think we are continuing to see liftings come out of that region, but that is, once you get past November 18th, 19th, that is a big question mark. We got to see what the fate, if you will, of that agreement is, because it holds so many keys to the market. Most notably, of course, to the corn export market. USDA, I mentioned earlier, left corn exports unchanged, and also to the wheat market in terms of the exports. Wheat exports from the U.S. are also unchanged. So what we're hearing right now, Drew, is there is some negotiation going on. Apparently they do want to get something arranged, but this has been such a fluid situation, Drew, it's hard to predict what's going to happen.
Sure. Makes sense. Thank you, Brian. Michael, barge freight continues to be a big story, as it was last month. What is that? What is barge freight telling you, and what is it dictating in terms of corn and soybean movements, both domestically and then the impacts on spreads here?
Yeah, that dovetails nicely into Brian's uncertainty in the Black Sea, because there's a lot of uncertainty here in the U.S. as far as domestic logistics and shipments and capacities go. It continues to still be a pretty hard to define market, fairly wide spreads in the bid and the ask, limited interest, low water levels persist, although there are some signs that maybe there's some relief in play here and things could improve kind of in the coming weeks and months. But it's still fairly tough. We've seen November interest pick up a little bit. There's maybe some feelers out there for D's, but it's still tough to define. So what it's done is it's restricted shipments and movements in a big way to the Gulf. We've seen a lot of capacity moving to the PNW via rail. Those elevations are really high right now as we try to export beans out of the Pacific Northwest. But with that being said too, along with trying to re-up the Black Sea, we also have the potential for an impending rail strike coming here in the next 2 weeks as that folds back up. So we need to just kind of keep a close eye on that, because that could have a serious disruption to domestic shipments and logistics here as we work through kind of the post-harvest slug of inventory.
Sure. Brian, what's the recent topic out of South America on the soybean side of the ledger? CONAB had their numbers out this morning. What do you see from Chinese demand, and how does that impact the U.S. markets here?
CONAB did increase their estimate this morning, Drew, compared to what it was in October. Planting is maybe a bit behind average in parts of Brazil. It was too wet in a few areas and maybe a bit too dry in others. But overall, Drew, the crop's off to a decent to good start, and the acreage potential is there to increase. So you're looking at the potential for a large increase in the crop size in Brazil this year compared to a year ago. Now, we still got a lot of the growing season left to go. There's still some indications of La Nina, which would impact the drier areas last year in southern Brazil. But there's supposed to be a nice rain coming across that southern Brazil area this weekend. So for the moment, Drew, on the supply side, we have to acknowledge that the potential is there, not only in acreage, but also in yield from Brazil. The wild card there is Argentina. The USDA did lower Argentina's crop today, Drew, 1.5 million tons to 49.5. We'll have to see how that develops, because Argentina is also forecast to get a good rain this weekend, but they've barely started planting their beans. So on the demand side, briefly, USDA left the Chinese import number unchanged this month at 98 million tons. So they're remaining aggressive with Chinese imports for this 22-23 crop year. The window for the U.S., of course, for now is wide open, as we're lifting between 90 to 100 total, not just to China, but total beans at the moment. But Drew, with the planting progressing as it has in Brazil, that window could close quicker than usual if the Brazilians start to harvest early in 2023. So for the moment,
Sure.
China is lifting a lot of beans. They're lifting a lot of U.S. beans. They actually bought some beans prior to the report this week. But again, all eyes have got to be focused on weather now as the crop in Brazil begins to approach vegetative state, pod set here as we get into mid-November, early December. And right now, again, underlying the potential for Brazil is there. More concern surrounds Argentina, though.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much, Brian. Appreciate that intel. Michael, last question for you. What do you see on the corn demand equation right now, from ethanol margins to grain-consuming animals to anything else that piques your interest.
Yeah, it's a little tough to define. On the export side, it feels like a lot of the focus has been more so prioritizing bean shipments, which to some degree makes sense. You know, with Brian referenced, it looks like we're going to have a pretty good South America crop coming on because of low water and a number of issues. You know, high U.S. dollar. There's a laundry list. It feels like we've missed the window of opportunity to really capitalize on bean exports. So we're clamoring and trying to catch up as fast as possible. But that's what's taking priority currently. So corn shipments are dragging. That's not to say we can't find ourselves in a position in the spring, depending on what happens in the Black Sea corridor, which again is anybody's guess. As the world needs to originate corn, the U.S. could become a key supplier then, but it's just going to be further out on the curve, and it remains to be seen at what capacity the interest for some of the larger global buyers, China in particular, is actually going to want to receive during that time. Ethanol margins look pretty good. I think we referenced that last month too. They've been coming up a little bit. It feels like inventories and tank space are fairly tight in in kind of the Chicago markets. That's kind of raised some of the sellable values. I'd say the eastern margins probably look a little better than western margins, where corn's a little tighter and basis has been higher. But we are seeing some signs of life in domestic demand, both on the livestock and the ethanol side. So where it's a slow burn right now, but there are some signs of optimism beginning to creep in.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you both for your time today. We'll have one more USDA report to recap next month, and then we'll be done for 2022. So thank you all for tuning in, and we look forward to any questions that you may have moving forward. And please check out our YouTube page when you get a chance. Thanks, and have a great day.